Marcus Williams stood at the check-in counter at Denver International Airport, his service dog Rex sitting calmly beside him. The German Shepherd wore his official vest, clearly marked with patches indicating his status as a trained service animal. Marcus had been looking forward to this trip home to see his family in Atlanta for months. After 3 tours in Afghanistan and 2 years of recovery from his injuries, this would be his first time flying since returning to civilian life. The airline representative, a young woman with perfectly styled hair and a practiced smile, looked down at Rex with obvious concern. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we don't allow pets in the cabin on this flight. You'll need to check your dog as cargo." Marcus felt his chest tighten, a familiar sensation that often preceded his anxiety attacks. He took a deep breath and spoke slowly. "This isn't a pet. Rex is my service dog. He's trained to help me with my PTSD and mobility issues from my military service. I have all his documentation right here." The woman barely glanced at the papers Marcus held out. Company policy is very clear about animals in the cabin. Large dogs must travel in cargo. We can arrange a special crate for him. "You don't understand," Marcus said, his voice remaining calm despite the growing frustration. "Rex isn't just a companion. He's medically necessary. He alerts me to anxiety attacks, helps me navigate crowded spaces, and provides stability when I have balance issues from my leg injury." Rex sensed his handler's distress and gently nudged Marcus's hand with his nose, a trained behavior to help ground him during stressful moments. The dog's brown eyes remained alert, watching both Marcus and the surrounding area for any signs of trouble. The check-in agent called over her supervisor, a stern-looking man in his 50s who approached with an air of authority. "What seems to be the problem here? This gentleman wants to bring his dog into the cabin, but our policy clearly states that large animals must travel as cargo," the young woman explained. The supervisor looked at Marcus, taking in his military bearing despite the slight limp, and the way he unconsciously favored his left side. "Sir, I understand you might be attached to your pet, but rules are rules. We can't make exceptions." Marcus pulled out his military ID, his service dog certification, and a letter from his psychiatrist explaining Rex's role in his treatment. "These aren't just rules you're breaking. This is federal law. The Air Carrier Access Act requires airlines to accommodate passengers with service animals." The supervisor barely looked at the documents. "Look, I've seen all kinds of fake service dog papers. People try to bring their pets on flights all the time, claiming they're service animals. We've had incidents with untrained dogs causing disturbances. Rex has over 2 years of specialized training," Marcus explained, his patience wearing thin. "He's been with me through my recovery. He knows how to behave on flights, in crowds, everywhere we go." As if to prove the point, Rex remained perfectly still despite the growing commotion around them. Other passengers were beginning to stare, and Marcus could feel the familiar weight of anxiety settling on his shoulders. His breathing became slightly more shallow, and Rex immediately responded by pressing his body against Marcus's leg, providing the deep pressure therapy he was trained to give. The supervisor noticed the dog's response, but seemed unimpressed. "Sir, you have 2 choices. Check the dog as cargo or find another flight. We're not going to compromise the safety and comfort of our other passengers." Marcus looked around the busy terminal, feeling overwhelmed by the noise and crowds. Rex continued his calming pressure against his leg, but Marcus could feel his heart rate increasing. "This dog has saved my life more times than I can count. He's not cargo. He's a trained medical device, just like a wheelchair or oxygen tank." A small crowd was gathering, some passengers looking sympathetic while others seemed annoyed by the delay. Marcus heard someone whisper, "Just put the dog underneath." "What's the big deal?" The comment stung. These people had no idea what Rex meant to him, how the dog had helped him rebuild his life after everything fell apart overseas. Rex had been there through the nightmares, the panic attacks, the days when getting out of bed felt impossible. "Final answer," the supervisor said coldly. "Cargo or no flight." Marcus felt the walls closing in around him. The bright lights of the airport seemed too harsh, the sounds too loud. Rex immediately stood and positioned himself to provide better support, his training kicking in automatically. The dog's presence helped, but Marcus knew he was fighting a losing battle against both the airline and his own trauma response. "There has to be someone else I can talk to," Marcus said, his voice starting to shake slightly. "A manager, customer service, someone who understands the law." The supervisor shrugged. "I'm a manager on duty, and I understand our policy perfectly. No large animals in the cabin. Period." Marcus pulled out his phone with trembling hands, thinking he should call his therapist or maybe contact a veterans' rights organization. But his flight was supposed to leave in less than 2 hours, and his family was expecting him. His nephew's birthday party was tomorrow, and he had promised he would be there. It would be the first family gathering he'd attended since coming home. Rex leaned harder against his leg, sensing the escalating distress. The dog's training told him to apply more pressure, to use his body weight to help ground his handler. Other passengers continued to watch, some taking pictures with their phones. Marcus felt trapped between his desperate need to get home to his family and an airline policy that seemed designed to exclude him. He had fought for his country, sacrificed his physical and mental health in service, and now he couldn't even get a flight home because of ignorance and inflexibility. The check-in area buzzed with activity around them, but Marcus felt increasingly isolated. Rex was his lifeline, his connection to stability and calm in a world that often felt chaotic and threatening. The thought of being separated from his service dog for hours in a cargo hold was not just inconvenient. It was potentially dangerous for both of them. As Marcus stood there, weighing his impossible options, he had no idea that someone was watching the entire interaction unfold, someone who would soon change everything. Captain Sarah Mitchell had been flying commercial aircraft for 15 years, and she'd seen her share of difficult situations at airports. But as she walked through the terminal toward her gate, pulling her rolling flight bag behind her, something about the commotion at the check-in counter caught her attention. She could see a man in obvious distress with what appeared to be a service dog, facing off against airline personnel. Sarah had grown up in a military family. Her father had served in Vietnam, and her brother was currently deployed overseas. She recognized the bearing of a soldier even from a distance, the way the man stood despite his obvious discomfort, the careful control in his posture that spoke of military training. She approached close enough to hear the conversation and felt her anger rising as she listened to the supervisor's dismissive treatment of what was clearly a legitimate service animal situation. The dog was perfectly behaved, wearing proper identification, and the veteran was providing all the correct documentation. Yet the airline staff seemed determined to ignore federal law. "Excuse me," Sarah said, stepping forward and showing her captain's ID to the supervisor. "I couldn't help but overhear. Is there a problem with this passenger's boarding?" The supervisor's demeanor immediately shifted when he saw her uniform and credentials. "Captain Mitchell, this gentleman is insisting on bringing his pet into the cabin against our policy." "His service dog," Sarah corrected firmly. "And it's not against policy. It's required by federal law." She turned to Marcus, who looked both surprised and relieved to have someone speaking up for him. "I'm Captain Sarah Mitchell. I believe I'll be flying you to Atlanta today." Marcus straightened slightly, recognizing the authority in her voice. "Marcus Williams, ma'am. And yes, I hope so. This is Rex, my service dog." Sarah crouched down to Rex's level, but didn't pet him, recognizing that he was working. "He's beautiful. What's his specialty?" "PTSD alert and response, mobility assistance, and deep pressure therapy," Marcus replied, grateful that someone understood the difference between a pet and a working animal. Standing back up, Sarah fixed the supervisor with a stern look. "Let me be very clear about something. The Air Carrier Access Act requires us to accommodate passengers with service animals. This isn't a suggestion or a courtesy, it's federal law. Refusing to allow this veteran and his service dog to board would not only be illegal discrimination, but it would also expose this airline to significant legal liability." The supervisor shifted uncomfortably. "Captain, our policy manual clearly states, your policy manual is wrong if it contradicts federal law," Sarah interrupted. "And I can guarantee you that the FAA Department of Transportation, and veteran advocacy groups will be very interested to hear about this incident if we don't resolve it immediately. She pulled out her phone and showed the supervisor a webpage. Here's the official DOT guidance on service animals. Large size is not a basis for refusal. Breed is not a basis for refusal. The only questions you're legally allowed to ask are whether this is a service animal required because of a disability and what task the animal is trained to perform. Mr. Williams has answered both questions. The young check-in agent looked confused. But we have passengers who are afraid of dogs. And what about allergies? Then, those passengers can be reseated, Sarah replied. You accommodate everyone. You don't exclude someone because of their disability. That's how inclusion works. Marcus watched this exchange with growing hope. For the first time since arriving at the airport, someone was not just listening to him, but actively advocating for his rights. Rex seemed to sense the shift in energy and relaxed slightly, though he remained alert and ready to respond if needed. I need to call my regional manager, the supervisor said, clearly looking for a way to save face while backing down. You do that, Sarah replied. But while you're on the phone, please process Mr. Williams' boarding pass for his assigned seat with his service dog. We have a schedule to maintain. The supervisor walked away to make his call, leaving the check-in agent to handle the boarding pass. She looked nervously between Sarah's captain's uniform and Marcus's documentation. I'm sorry about all this confusion, the young woman said quietly as she began typing on her computer. I really didn't know the rules about service dogs. That's exactly the problem, Sarah said, but her tone was more educational than angry. Your airline needs to train its staff properly on disability law. This shouldn't happen to anyone, especially not to a veteran. Marcus felt his breathing becoming easier as he watched his boarding pass print out. Captain Mitchell, I can't thank you enough. I was starting to think I'd have to miss my nephew's birthday party. How old is your nephew? Sarah asked with a smile. He's turning 8. It's the first family event I've been able to attend since I came back from overseas. My sister has been planning this for months. Sarah's expression softened. Then, we definitely need to get you there on time. She turned to the check-in agent. Please make sure Mr. Williams and Rex are seated in an aisle seat with extra legroom. And I want a note in the system about this incident for training purposes. The supervisor returned from his phone call, looking defeated. Regional says to follow federal guidelines and accommodate the service animal. Excellent, Sarah said. I'm glad we could clear that up. Mr. Williams, what time do you need to be in Atlanta? The party starts at 2 tomorrow afternoon, but I was hoping to get in tonight to spend some time with my family beforehand. Well, this flight gets in at 8:30 p.m., so you'll have plenty of time. Sarah checked her watch. I need to get to the aircraft for pre-flight checks, but I'll see you on board. As Sarah walked away, Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized was there. Rex looked up at him with those intelligent brown eyes, tail wagging slightly for the first time since they'd arrived at the airport. The check-in process finished smoothly after that. The young agent even apologized again and wished Marcus a good flight. But as he walked toward the security checkpoint with Rex at his side, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this incident represented something larger about how veterans with invisible disabilities were treated in civilian society. He thought about all the other veterans who might have faced similar situations without a sympathetic pilot to intervene. How many have been forced to leave their service dogs behind, or missed important flights, or simply given up on traveling altogether because of ignorant policies and poorly trained staff? Rex pressed against his leg again, sensing his handler's pensive mood. Marcus looked down at his faithful companion and felt a surge of gratitude not just for the dog, but for Captain Mitchell's intervention. Sometimes it took someone in a position of authority to make the system work the way it was supposed to. As they approached the security line, Marcus wondered if he would have a chance to properly thank the captain during the flight. He had no idea that their interaction was far from over, and that Captain Mitchell had plans that would make this journey even more meaningful than he could imagine. The security checkpoint went smoothly for Marcus and Rex. The TSA agents were well trained on service animal protocols and treated them both with respect and efficiency. Rex walked calmly through the metal detector while Marcus went through the body scanner, and they were reunited on the other side without incident. It was a refreshing change from the ordeal at check-in. At the gate, Marcus found a quiet corner where he and Rex could sit without blocking foot traffic. The dog settled down beside him, chin resting on his paws, but eyes still alert. Marcus pulled out his phone to text his sister that he would be on time after all. "Looks like I'll make it tonight. Can't wait to see everyone," he typed, deciding not to mention the earlier complications. His sister Jennifer replied almost immediately. "Tommy is so excited his Uncle Marcus is coming to his party. He's been asking about Rex too. He wants to show him his new baseball glove." Marcus smiled, thinking about his nephew. The 8-year-old had been fascinated by Rex during their video calls, asking endless questions about what the dog could do and how he was trained. It would be good to see the boy's wonder in person and maybe help him understand why his uncle needed Rex's help. About 30 minutes before boarding, Marcus noticed Captain Mitchell approaching the gate. She had changed into her full uniform and looked every inch the professional pilot. But when she saw him, her expression warmed with recognition. "Mr. Williams, how did the rest of check-in go?" "Much better, thanks to you. I really can't express how grateful I am for your help back there." "You don't need to thank me for doing what was right," she replied, sitting down in the chair next to him. Rex lifted his head to acknowledge her presence, but remained in his working position. "Mind if I ask what branch you served in?" "Army. 3 tours in Afghanistan with the 82nd Airborne." "You military family." "Air Force brat, actually. My dad flew in Vietnam, and my brother is currently in the Navy. I grew up understanding what service means." She paused, studying Marcus's face. "What happened over there, if you don't mind me asking?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. He'd gotten better at talking about his experiences in therapy, but it was still difficult. "IED on my last patrol before coming home. 3 of my buddies didn't make it. I got lucky with just a concussion, some shrapnel, and a messed up leg. But the brain injury left me with PTSD and balance issues." "That's not lucky. That's survival," Sarah said gently. "And the fact that you're here, taking care of yourself, and using the resources available like Rex shows real strength." Marcus looked down at his service dog, who was watching the conversation with those intelligent eyes. "Rex saved my life in a different way than my buddies did over there. After I came home, I was in a bad place. Couldn't sleep, couldn't be around people, couldn't even go to the grocery store without having panic attacks. The VA got me connected with this organization that trains service dogs for veterans." "How long have you had him?" 2 years now. It took about 6 months for us to really bond, and for me to trust his alerts. Now I can't imagine life without him." Marcus scratched behind Rex's ears, one of the few times during working hours when the dog was allowed to receive affection. "He alerts me when my anxiety is spiking before I even realize it. Helps me navigate crowds, provides stability when I'm walking, and gives deep pressure therapy when I'm having flashbacks or nightmares." Sarah watched the interaction between man and dog with obvious respect. "My dad had nightmares for years after Vietnam. Back then, they didn't really understand PTSD or have resources like service dogs. He just had to figure it out on his own. A lot of guys from his generation are still suffering in silence. At least now we know more about trauma and how to treat it. Though clearly, not everyone understands how important service dogs are to that treatment." "Well, speaking of that," Sarah said, standing up as the gate agent announced the beginning of boarding, "I've been thinking about what happened earlier. Would you mind if I made a small announcement during the flight? Nothing that would embarrass you, just something to help educate passengers about service animals and veteran issues." Marcus considered this. Part of him preferred to fly anonymously, but he thought about other veterans who might face similar discrimination. "What did you have in mind?" "Just a brief explanation of what service dogs do and why they're protected by law. Maybe mention that we have a veteran on board without identifying you specifically. I think most people just don't understand the difference between pets and working animals." "You know what? That sounds good. If it helps even one other veteran avoid what I went through today, it's worth it." They boarded with the first group, Marcus appreciating the extra time to get settled without the stress of crowds pressing behind him. His seat was indeed in an aisle with extra legroom, perfect for accommodating Rex's position beside him. The dog settled immediately into the space, tucking himself neatly under the seat ahead and to the side so he wasn't blocking the aisle. As other passengers boarded, Marcus noticed several people looking curiously at Rex. A few smiled and nodded, while others seemed uncertain. One woman with a young child stopped to ask if Rex was friendly. "He's working right now, so it's better not to pet him," Marcus explained kindly. "But he's very well trained and gentle." The little girl looked disappointed, but nodded seriously. "Is he a police dog?" "He's a service dog. He helps me when I'm not feeling well." "That's so cool. He's like a doctor dog." Marcus smiled. That's actually a pretty good way to think about it. As the plane filled up, Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that came with being in enclosed spaces with lots of people. Rex immediately sensed the change and shifted position to provide more contact pressure against Marcus's leg. The dog's calm presence helped Marcus regulate his breathing and stay focused. Captain Mitchell's voice came over the intercom as they prepared for departure. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Flight 1247 with service to Atlanta. Before we begin our safety demonstration, I'd like to take a moment to talk about something important." Marcus felt his heartbeat quicken, wondering what she was going to say. "Today we have the honor of carrying a military veteran who served multiple tours overseas in defense of our freedom. He travels with a service dog trained to assist with injuries sustained during his service. Service animals are not pets. They're highly trained medical devices that provide life-saving assistance to people with disabilities." The captain's voice continued with professional authority. "These animals are protected by federal law and have the right to accompany their handlers anywhere the public is allowed. I ask that you please respect this veteran's service and his service dog's important work by not distracting the animal during our flight." Marcus felt the eyes of nearby passengers on him, but the attention felt different now, respectful rather than curious or annoyed. A man across the aisle caught his eye and nodded with obvious appreciation. An older woman a few rows up turned around and mouthed "thank you" with tears in her eyes. Rex seemed to sense the shift in energy around them and relaxed slightly, though he remained alert and ready to respond if needed. Marcus realized that Captain Mitchell had not only resolved his immediate problem, but had potentially changed some minds about service animals and veterans' needs. As the plane pushed back from the gate and began its taxi to the runway, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a sense of belonging and acceptance from strangers. For the first time since coming home, he felt like his service and sacrifice were truly understood and valued by the people around him. The flight to Atlanta was one of the smoothest Marcus had experienced in years, both literally and figuratively. Rex remained calm throughout takeoff, settling into his trained position as the plane climbed to cruising altitude. The dog's steady presence helped Marcus manage the confined space and engine noise that sometimes triggered his anxiety. About an hour into the flight attendant approached Marcus with a warm smile. "Mr. Williams? Captain Mitchell asked me to check if you and your service dog need anything. Water for Rex, perhaps? A small cup of water would be great. Thank you. Rex usually doesn't drink much during flights, but it's good to have available." The flight attendant returned with a small bowl and bottle of water. "The captain also wanted you to know that she's received several compliments from passengers about her announcement. Apparently, it really opened some eyes about service animals." Marcus looked around the cabin and noticed that indeed, passengers seemed more aware and respectful. No one was staring inappropriately or trying to get Rex's attention. A teenager across the aisle was reading something on his phone about service dog training, and the business traveler behind him had struck up a quiet conversation with his seatmate about veteran support programs. That announcement meant a lot, Marcus told the flight attendant. It's not often that someone in authority takes the time to educate people about these issues. Midway through the flight, Marcus noticed an elderly man in the row behind him seemed distressed. The man was gripping the armrests tightly breathing heavily and looking pale. Marcus had seen enough panic attacks to recognize the signs. "Excuse me, sir," Marcus said, turning around carefully. "Are you okay? You look like you might be having some anxiety." The man nodded shakily. "I don't usually fly. My grandson is graduating from college tomorrow, and I promised I'd be there. But I'm not handling this well." Marcus understood that feeling completely. "Would it help if I shared a technique my therapist taught me? It's called box breathing, and it really helps when you feel panicked." For the next few minutes, Marcus guided the elderly gentleman through breathing exercises that he'd learned in therapy. Rex, sensing the distress of someone nearby, had shifted position to provide a calming presence for both men. The dog's natural therapy instincts were working even though he wasn't technically providing service to the stranger. "Thank you, son," the man said as his breathing normalized. "That really helped. I didn't know young people knew about those kinds of techniques." "I learned them the hard way," Marcus replied with a gentle smile. "Sometimes our difficult experiences can help us help others." The man looked at Rex with new understanding. "Is that why you have the dog?" "For anxiety. Among other things, yes. He's trained to help me with PTSD from my military service. He can sense when I'm about to have an attack, and helps me manage it before it gets out of control." I never really understood what those service dogs do. I thought they were just for blind people. A lot of people think that. Service dog can be trained for all kinds of disabilities: seizure alert, diabetic alert, mobility assistance, psychiatric service work like Rex does. They're amazing animals. The conversation seemed to attract the attention of other nearby passengers, who listened respectfully without intruding. Marcus found himself becoming an impromptu educator about service animals and veteran issues, something he never would have been comfortable doing before Rex came into his life. A young mother with a child asked about how to explain service dogs to kids who want to pet them. A business traveler wanted to know more about organizations that train service dogs for veterans. Even a teenager across the aisle shared that his older brother was struggling with PTSD after serving in Iraq. "The most important thing," Marcus explained, "is that people understand these aren't pets. They're working animals with a job to do. Petting them, feeding them, or distracting them can interfere with their ability to keep their handler safe." He gestured to Rex, who had remained perfectly positioned throughout all the conversations, alert but not distracted. "See how Rex is aware of everything going on around us, but he's focused on me? He's constantly monitoring my stress levels, watching for triggers, ready to respond if I need help." That level of attention and training takes years to develop. The elderly gentleman who'd had the panic attack leaned forward. "It must be comforting to have that kind of support with you all the time." "It is," Marcus agreed, "but it's also a big responsibility. Rex depends on me to keep him healthy, continue his training, and make sure he gets downtime when he's not working. It's a partnership." As if understanding the conversation, Rex looked up at Marcus with those intelligent brown eyes, tail giving a small wag before he resumed his alert position. The captain's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our initial descent into Atlanta. Flight attendants, please prepare for landing." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest as the plane began to descend, but Rex immediately responded with gentle pressure against his leg. The breathing techniques he'd shared with the elderly passenger served him well as he managed his own anxiety about landing. "Will you be okay?" the elderly man asked, having learned to recognize the signs of anxiety himself. "I'll be fine. Rex has got me covered," Marcus replied, grateful for both his service dog and the unexpected human connections he'd made during the flight. As the plane touched down in Atlanta, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: genuine excitement about being around people. The flight had reminded him that most people were kind and curious rather than judgmental when they understood what service dogs actually do. The elderly passenger shook Marcus's hand as they prepared to deplane. "Thank you for helping me today, and thank you for your service. I'm going to look into supporting some veteran organizations when I get home." Similar sentiments echoed from other passengers as they gathered their belongings. The young mother promised to teach her daughter about service animals, and the business traveler asked for the name of the organization that had trained Rex. Marcus realized that Captain Mitchell's simple announcement had sparked something bigger than education about service dogs. It had created a moment of community and understanding that connected strangers around shared values of respect and support. As they waited for their turn to deplane, Marcus looked down at Rex and scratched behind his ears. "Good boy. You did great today." Rex's tail wagged, happy for the praise and the brief moment of affection. Marcus had boarded this plane, dreading the journey and feeling isolated by the discrimination he'd faced at check-in. Now he was leaving feeling connected to his fellow travelers and optimistic about the reception he'd receive at his nephew's birthday party. Sometimes he thought it really did take just one person in the right position to change everything. As passengers began deplaning, Marcus waited for the aisle to clear before gathering his carry-on bag and preparing to leave with Rex. He had learned that patience was better than struggling through crowds, and Rex performed better when they could move at their own pace. "Mr. Williams?" Marcus looked up to see Captain Mitchell approaching from the cockpit, having finished her post-flight duties. She was smiling warmly and looked pleased about something. "Captain Mitchell, thank you again for everything today." That announcement made such a difference, not just for me, but for everyone on the plane. "Actually, I want to talk to you about that," she said, settling into the empty seat across the aisle. "What you did during the flight, helping that gentleman with his panic attack and educating passengers about service animals, that was remarkable." Marcus felt slightly embarrassed by the praise. "I'll just share what I've learned. Rex does most of the work. Don't sell yourself short. You turned what could have been a difficult flight into a learning experience for everyone. And I have an idea I'd like to run by you." She pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a photo she had taken from the cockpit window during boarding. It showed the ground crew and some passengers, with Rex clearly visible walking calmly beside Marcus. "With your permission, I'd like to share this story with our airline's training department. What happened to check in today should never happen again, and your grace under pressure showed exactly how these situations should be handled." Marcus considered this. "You think it would actually make a difference?" "I know it would. Sometimes change happens one story at a time, one training session at a time. Your experience today could help train staff at airports across the country. Then yes, absolutely. If it helps other veterans avoid what I went through, it's worth it." Captain Mitchell's expression grew more serious. "There's something else. I want to apologize personally for what you experienced with our staff today. That supervisor's behavior was unacceptable and, frankly, illegal. The airline needs to do better. Apology accepted, but you weren't the one who caused the problem. You were the one who fixed it. Still, you shouldn't have needed a pilot to intervene. The system should work correctly from the start." She stood up as the last passengers finished deplaning. "Would you mind if I walked out with you? I'd like to meet your family if they're picking you up." Marcus smiled. "I'd like that. My sister Jennifer and my nephew Tommy are coming to get us. Tommy is especially excited to meet Rex." They walked through the jet bridge together, Rex maintaining his professional demeanor despite the new environment. At the gate, Marcus immediately spotted his sister waving enthusiastically, with 8-year-old Tommy bouncing beside her. "Uncle Marcus!" Tommy ran toward them, but stopped short when he saw Rex, remembering the instructions he'd been given about service dogs. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said, giving his nephew a big hug. "This is Rex. You can say hi to him, but remember he's working right now." Tommy looked at the dog with wide eyes. "Hi, Rex. Thank you for taking care of my uncle." Rex's tail wagged slightly at the gentle greeting, but he remained focused on his job. Jennifer approached more cautiously, clearly emotional about seeing her brother after so long. "Marcus, you look good," she said, embracing him carefully. "And this must be the famous Rex we've heard so much about. Jennifer, I'd like you to meet Captain Sarah Mitchell. She's the reason we're here on time tonight." Sarah shook Jennifer's hand warmly. "Your brother is pretty special. He handled a difficult situation today with real class." "What kind of situation?" Jennifer asked, her protective instincts immediately alert. "Just some confusion at check-in about Rex," Marcus said, not wanting to worry his sister. Captain Mitchell straightened it out, but Sarah felt differently about minimizing the incident. Actually, it was more than confusion. Your brother faced illegal discrimination today, and he handled it with dignity while standing up for his rights and the rights of other disabled passengers. Jennifer's expression hardened. What happened? Marcus briefly explained the check-in incident, watching his sister's face grow more and more angry. Tommy listened wide-eyed, not fully understanding, but sensing the serious tone. I can't believe they treated you that way, Jennifer said. After everything you've been through, everything you've sacrificed. But look how it turned out, Marcus said, gesturing to the small group gathered around them. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best connections. Tommy tugged on his uncle's sleeve. Uncle Marcus, can you tell me more about what Rex does on the way home? And can I help take care of him while you're visiting? I'd love to tell you about Rex. And yes, you can help with some things. But remember, he's not a pet. He has a very important job keeping me healthy and safe. As they walked toward baggage claim, Captain Mitchell fell in a step beside them. I hope you don't mind, but I took the liberty of contacting our customer service department about today's incident. The supervisor who gave you trouble will be receiving additional training on disability law, and the check-in agent seemed genuinely interested in learning more about service animals. You didn't have to do that, Marcus said. Yes, I did. Part of being in a leadership position is making sure the people you work with treat others with dignity and respect. Today's incident was a failure of training and leadership, not just policy. At baggage claim, they waited for Marcus's single checked bag while Tommy peppered him with questions about Rex's training, what commands he knew, and how he could tell when Uncle Marcus needed help. The coolest thing, Marcus explained, is that Rex can sense changes in my body that I don't even notice yet. He can smell chemical changes that happen when I'm getting anxious, and he can feel changes in my heartbeat and breathing through tiny movements I make. That's like a superpower, Tommy exclaimed. It really is. Dogs have much better senses than people do, and Rex was trained to use his superpowers to help me. Sarah watched this interaction with obvious pleasure. You're a natural teacher, Marcus. Have you ever considered speaking to schools or community groups about veteran issues and service animals? I haven't really thought about it. I'm still getting used to being around people again. Well, if you ever want to, I think you'd be excellent at it. Today proved that you can help people understand complex issues in simple, relatable terms. Jennifer picked up Marcus's bag from the carousel. Sarah, would you like to join us for dinner? I know it's late, but we're going to grab something quick before heading home. That's very kind, but I don't want to intrude on family time. You haven't seen each other in months. You're not intruding, Marcus said. You're the reason we're all here together right now. Besides, I think Tommy has about 50 more questions about flying that only a pilot can answer. Tommy nodded enthusiastically. Do you know how to fly fighter jets? Have you ever seen UFOs? How fast can your plane go? Sarah laughed. Okay, you convinced me, but just for a little while. As they walked toward the restaurant, Rex maintaining his position beside Marcus, the group felt more like old friends and strangers who had met just hours earlier. Tommy chattered excitedly about the birthday party tomorrow, asking if Rex could wear a party hat and whether he knew any tricks he could show the other kids. Rex doesn't do tricks, Marcus explained patiently. He does important work, but I can show everyone some of the amazing things he's trained to do to help me. Jennifer watched her brother's interaction with both the boy and the pilot with growing amazement. When they'd last spent time together, Marcus had been withdrawn and anxious around people. Tonight he was relaxed, engaged, and even helping others feel comfortable. Rex had clearly made an enormous difference in his recovery. Over dinner, the conversation flowed naturally between flying stories, military experiences, and plans for Tommy's birthday party. Sarah shared stories about her father's service in Vietnam and her brother's current deployment. Marcus found himself opening up about his own experiences in ways that felt natural rather than forced. The thing people don't understand about PTSD, he explained to Tommy, is that it's not about being weak or scared. It's about your brain trying to protect you from danger, even when you're safe. Rex helps my brain remember that I'm safe now. Tommy nodded seriously. So Rex is like your brain's helper. That's exactly right. He's my brain's helper. As they prepared to leave the restaurant, Sarah handed Marcus her business card. I meant what I said about speaking opportunities. The airline industry needs more education about serving passengers with disabilities, and veteran organizations are always looking for speakers who can connect with audiences. I'll think about it, Marcus promised. And Marcus, I want you to know that meeting you today reminded me why I love this job. It's not just about flying planes. It's about taking care of people and sometimes being in the right place at the right time to make a difference. Jennifer drove them home through the familiar streets of Marcus's childhood neighborhood, while Tommy asked nonstop questions from the back seat about Rex, military service, and tomorrow's party plans. Rex dozed lightly in the cargo area, finally able to relax slightly after a long day of working. As they pulled into the driveway of the house where Marcus had grown up, he felt a sense of completion that had been missing for years. The day had started with discrimination and anxiety, but it was ending with new friendships, family connections, and a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow is going to be such a good day, Tommy announced as they got out of the car. Wait until I tell everyone at school that my uncle is a hero with a superhero dog. Marcus laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. We'll have to make sure Rex gets some downtime tomorrow, too. Even superhero dogs need to rest sometimes. As they walked toward the house, Marcus realized that Captain Mitchell's simple act of standing up for what was right had created ripple effects that would extend far beyond this single flight. He was already thinking about ways he might pay that kindness forward, maybe by speaking to groups like Sarah had suggested, or by helping other veterans navigate the challenges of traveling with service animals. Rex stayed close to his side as they approached the front door, alert and ready for whatever came next, just as he always was. But for the first time in a long time, Marcus felt ready too.